Well, way over there, we're at the end of another one, and I was going to air this episode like 2 weeks ago when I placed this old Cat 20 up on the rock pile here, the rock feature I should call it. And yeah, we got so busy getting ready for plow day and doing plow day and all that those files have lived on my camera for a good 2 weeks now. So here it is. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. So it's time to tell the story of old 134, and pardon my shadow here. It's just, you know, it's late in the day. This is about the only time I really had to do this, so we're gonna be fighting the glare from the sun and the shadow and everything else. Might be a little bit better if I kneel down, kind of get out of there, but boy, that maple probably is going to be almost red in the next couple days. That's going to look really nice back there. Those bur oaks just kind of turn brown and leaves fall off. But yeah, so we got the Cat 20 placed on top of the rock feature last weekend, and really wasn't any dialogue in that one, and it surprised me how many people said it made them cry. Really wasn't going for that. That kind of surprised me, but hey, I guess I'll take it, right? So why do we call it old 134? Well, we'll climb up the stair steps that I kind of built into here. 1, 2, 3, just like that. Let's just see if we can catch the serial number stamped on the top of the case here. Maybe not, but we have a PL 134. So that makes this a rather early Caterpillar 20. This one is in 1928. Now they started building these in 1927. The Cat 20 happened to be the first model of tractor designed and built from the ground up by the newly formed Caterpillar Tractor Company. Of course, in 1925, Holt and Best merged and they formed Caterpillar, but they kept on producing existing models until they came out with this one, the L or PL Series 20. Being that this is a PL serial number, this was built in Peoria. If that just would have been a L serial number, they built the L's in San Leandro, California. So in 1927, they built like the first 58 units of these in San Leandro that year only. Then in 1928, they also started producing them in Peoria, Illinois. That's where this one comes into play. So this was the 134th Caterpillar 20 tractor built in Peoria that year. And it's kind of an old survivor. There's a whole lot wrong with it. And this was one of the few tractors that I bought just to be a parts unit, because it has the same 4200G 4-cylinder gasoline engine in it as my number 9 Auto Patrols. And of course, yeah, we're not going to see much through those louvers there, but that's pretty much what I picked this up for, and darn that glare again. And several years ago when I bought this tractor, the engine was stuck. It also had the remnants of an old logging winch on the back, and the whole seat box had been elevated about a good 8 inches or so. And by the time I had found it, the gentleman that I purchased it from, well, he is kind of a buyer, a seller, a flipper, and a part-time scrapper. He had already taken all that old logging winch off the back. He'd cut it off, scrapped it, and he assured me that it was nothing factory. It was a homebrew, very cobbled on affair. Had been welded and patched so many times, it said it hurt him to even look at it, and he assured me I wasn't out anything by that winch having already been removed. So still would have liked to seen it myself, but it was already gone by that point. And I hauled it home and I took everything that I could use for engine parts out of this thing. It was stuck on number 3 cylinder, but I salvaged the cylinder head, the cylinder jugs, the pistons, the rods, the crankshaft, the camshaft, the timing drive components. I literally stripped that engine block clean. There is nothing left in that engine block at all. Once I had all the parts off of it, well, I had assessed the rest of it already and came to the conclusion this was not going to be a fixer-upper. It was just too far gone. So the next thing I did was made all kinds of very rudimentary flat metal plates to cover all of the openings that were left in this engine block, just to kind of keep critters out of it, just keep water out of it, just to kind of keep everything clean. I also pulled the radiator core out of the surround. You can see, you can look right in there. There's no core left in there at all. just hastily reassembled the top tank and the side pieces, and there wasn't much left of it because, well, everything had been frozen and cracked and welded down here. And get up on the top. The side pieces were not bad. The top cover, it's kind of broken, and you know, it's kind of some remnants of some old orange county paint or municipality township paint. A lot of those municipality owned tractors were painted orange back in the day, but we're getting off on a tangent again. Anyway, with all the engine parts out and the radiator core out and the radiator shell hastily reassembled, I set it on there, and it still looked neat. And I decided at that point in time I was going to try and turn it into a yard ornament, yard art as they call it. So Senior had a couple of old louvered side panels laying around that I don't even know what they were from. And if you look closely at them, you can just barely detect, we'll have to get over to this other side, a little bit of old green paint. I don't even know what they were from, but they were, well, the louvered sections were about the right size just to place in here and kind of hide the fact that I had taken the whole engine out of this thing. So put a custom curl at the top here so that they would intersect with the curl that's on the hood and align with the rod that goes through. They do hinge up, they do work. I just threw some washers and springs down here on the old catch fingers just to hold them closed. But yeah, salvaging those old louvered sections, those side panels, really kind of dressed this thing up. So now that I had the front end pretty well squared away, I turned my attention to the back and those poor ragged edged torched fenders. And I just love the styling on these, the way they curve down at the back and kind of follow the contour of that drive sprocket back there in the tracks. And my goal was just to make this thing look good from 10 or more feet away, and I'm pretty sure I pulled it off. So what I did was took the cutoff wheel and I squared up all those ragged and torched edges, and then I just took some angle iron, just kind of bent it to kind of closely match that radius, bent a flat piece of steel to match. I even did a little bit of custom riveting on those areas there. Those are old sickle section rivets that I just threw the domed head on top, peened them over on the back, so they kind of match the rest of the rivets that were still intact on the remains of the factory fenders. And yeah, we didn't get too worried about gaps because from about 20 feet away you don't see those anyway. And put the uprights in there because all that stuff was also torched out, and we're kind of flat and clean there as opposed to, or in comparison to, the beat up and dented in seat box. But for the most part, I think it came out pretty good. So I just left all that raw steel out in the elements to weather, and I think it matches pretty well right now. We got that old traditional look back. We didn't have to break the bank to do it, and just kind of used up some scrap in the process. From here, it looks pretty good. I mean, I don't know if you guys had noticed already that those were sections or not, but I think it all turned out pretty well. Now for the walk around part of it, and all the reasons why I decided this was not going to be a fixer-upper. I mean, where do you start? Just a good overall indicator of use. You can see the brake pedals are starting to get worn smooth. It's got a lot of hours on it, and we got one steering clutch handle that's missing. That's all right, we just leave that the way it is. I like the old, like the wavy, it's kind of part of a logo in that clutch inspection cover, but there's no lettering in it, but that's just how they made those. It does still have the gear shift tag intact. A little bit of a damaged spot right there, but all the instructions are the same with the shift pattern and everything. And that oil cup for steering clutch release bearing is missing its cap. This one still in place and still springs, but yeah, foot plates are intact. I think this was maybe part of the brake interlock. Of course, yeah, we have the notches on both. Throttle would have came up, I think, on this side. All that stuff was long gone by the time I got it. Remnants of the old seat cushion. You still have the spring is intact. And in the video, or in the episode last time, you guys noticed I went and picked this old weathered piece of wood off my debris pile on the rock pile over there. And the reason I like this one is because it had all these little rusty nails in it. And I don't know what they were pounding so many nails into that wood for, but it kind of mimics like old upholstery tacks in a way. And we still had these two brackets up here on the seat back, so they were just perfect to hang that on. And that's my my attempt at the remnants of an old weathered seat back cushion. You can still see some of the old fabric where it's actually sticking to the seat box there, but the old patent tag is long gone. You can see an old rivet hole there, part of an old rivet still in place there, another one gone there, and it would have had a larger tag on the back as well. Of course, all that stuff is gone. See another hole from that, but yeah, I can't imagine how many impacts the back of that seat made. And yeah, this came from up on the Iron Range, up north of Virginia, Minnesota, and tractors have never had an easy life up there, these old ones especially. And you guys have already seen all the damage to the radiator. Final drives were horrible. This one, when I got it, didn't have any oil left in it at all. It's just a bunch of dry powdery rust came out when I pulled the bottom plug. Not even oil. Just, I mean, I'm sure everything in here is shot. And you go around the other side, this one did have oil in it, but the bearings are so out of this drive sprocket that if you look close, you can see how far forward this whole sprocket and hub have heaved in this housing out here. I can actually stick my finger in at the back here between the hub and the housing, and the tension of the track, being that those bearings were so loose, heaved the sprocket forward to the point it wore into the housing and eventually cracked it out. So when you put a pry bar in here, you can float that sprocket all over the place. So this final drive is hatched. I'm pretty sure the other final drive is hatched. It's like we had a cracked spoke at one time. Actually, they welded it, and it looks like it might be cracking again. But sprocket wear, these are getting really sharp. They're beyond worn out. Top carrier roller, yeah, it's all loose in there. I think someone, you can see, has been trying to pound in some shim stock or some kind of a filler between the shaft and that flange, trying to tighten them up a bit, I believe. Part of the old grease fitting on there yet. That's the kind that had the two little tabs sticking out on each side. We weren't in the button head era yet. And track frames are, well, horrible. This one's all chewed up and it's actually heaved and twisted. These bolts are all stretched. We have the remnants of the old Sprocket Shield right here that used to extend all the way up here. They actually covered quite a bit of this, but when they decided they didn't need them anymore, like happened here, they just torched most of them out, because this dome piece here was a part of that shield, that dirt guard, but it also caps off the end of that bearing hub and keeps all the debris out. So they had to keep that piece on. That is intact on both sides yet. We have quite the selection of different headed bolts on that sprocket there. I'm sure it's had a lot of patchwork done in the past. And of course, rails are completely run out. Pins and bushings are beyond worn out. There's so much slack in there. Bottom rollers have had a lot of weld buildup. Front idlers, much the same. Look at how oblong that bore is worn for that shaft right there. And the idler has been running so loose that it's actually drifted over and gouged in and worn into the track frame. And up front here, this is like a guide on the inside of the track frame right here that kind of helps to keep this idler square. They've ran this idler so far out on the front of these track frames because the pins and bushings have stretched so far that this top corner has been milled out as the pin bosses pass by. That's how far in excess of 100% worn they've actually pushed this thing. And I don't know what these ropes are for. I don't know if it was someone's attempt at a grease seal, like if they were once more out towards that hub or not. They're still in place on each side, so I left them. They're just, they're kind of cool. Around to the other side, again, we're the same way. And you can see how that idler has been chewing into the track frame over here, and you actually see how much distance we have here and how little we have there. That's because this whole thing's sitting wonky from pulling it on these rocks, and most of the track pads are all loose on the links. One interesting thing about these track pads though, these are the original style that came on this early Cat 20. They are a cast steel pad. You can tell that by the way the grouser bars have recesses behind them up on the back side of the pad. That's really almost rare to even see these anymore. It's amazing they lasted this long. You can see how these are starting to wear through. A little bit of daylight there. A little bit of daylight on that one too. And of course the snow relief holes have been torched in. That's standard in Minnesota here, but yeah, so many of those are loose. This thing must have just rattled and clanked like crazy. Rollers on this side are even worse. You can see where the flanges have been heavily built back up with weld, all three of them. So they've worn the flanges right off at one time, built them all back. Pins and bushings, same way. They've actually been built up with weld on the bushings. And I don't know, they couldn't have been worn all the way through, because I don't know how you'd build that bushing up without welding it to the pin if they were worn all the way through. But somebody just kept throwing metal on this thing. See this top carrier roller here? That's all been welded. They just kept throwing metal back on this thing to get it back in service, to just get a few more hours out of it. Track frames are so loose on all the pivots and everything. You can see where the tracks coming around had worn a hole clear through this side panel. Somebody went in there with a welder, patched it all back up again. I think they threw in a few extra pieces while they were at it. Just completely torn up. Again, some remnants of the old municipality orange on the fuel tank. I think the fuel tank's about the best aspect of this machine. I don't know if it would leak if a person ever put any fluid in it or not, but back here, look at the drawbar. Another telltale indicator of past use, and you can tell they wore this one completely out, and then they actually broke the top ear off of it. They added metal and welded one back on, and then they wore it even more. And I think that's an old cut off, it's a short axle or stub shaft or something. That's for their swinging drawbar. That's their pin for that. That's what was in it when I got it, so I left it alone. Drawbar braces, of course, they don't even have bolts in these because they've been broken so many times. They've welded them, and I think they welded them right to the swing plate. And yeah, you look over here, brazing. Lots of brazing weld on that. And we have repairs up here where that metal's been added. Over there where that's been added. You can see the old guards inside here just worn and mangled where those tracks are coming up around. Both sides, you can see we're just about hitting right there. Final drive housings didn't look like they were popped at all, but just wear on this thing everywhere you look. And the old toolbox on the fender. Now, this is not Cat original, but it just has the right look. I like the bead that's rolled in the lid. Still has part of the old flip-up latch right there. It looks like it might have had a lock at one time. I mean, this thing was kind of cool, and I just realized the other day there's still some nuts and bolts in this thing from when I stripped all the engine parts out of it. So we'll have to get those cleaned out and throw them in a can, get them back home one of these days. But a little bit of the orange left there, a little bit of the orange left there, and up here, mimicking a stack. I think this was in that toolbox when I hauled it home, and it's just something that I've had placed in here just to kind of replicate what would be an exhaust stack. This is another interesting, almost a folk art type piece. This was on top of the air cleaner when I hauled this home, and this is entirely handmade. I don't even know what this top used to be in a former life, and then a piece of pipe, and they welded 3 little struts on there, and that's what their air cleaner top was. When I bought this, I hauled it home that way, and that was just such a cool piece. There's no way I could have thrown it out. So that just kind of sits in there, just kind of pays homage again to the guys that just fixed and fixed and fixed these things until they were just well past the point of even being worth it, and they fixed it more. I mean, I can relate. We do a lot of that stuff still at the Ford dealer. And so many of these bolts just welded, shot. Of course, these flat track frames always accumulated a lot of dirt, and then they never got cleaned off, and the moisture sat on here and it just rusted these things like crazy. There's been a lot of welding going on that diagonal brace that goes in. We still have a little bit of the leather boot left and some of the old wire clamps on the brake pedal pull linkage, and I think they were even left on the other side too, if I remember correctly. Let's just have a quick look. Yeah, a little bit of it left here. You can see some of the internal spring in there. It's kind of interesting pieces to still have on there, but yeah, you can see how badly this track frame is bent out at the back, and it's even kicked out at the bottom, twisted. Bolts missing there. I mean, you'd literally have to start over with everything on this, and by that point, what do you have left? You know, it's not even the same machine anymore by the time you've done everything that had to be done to this. So we just we admire it now. Turn it into a monument. Old 134 is a superstar, and I bet none of her prior owners ever saw this coming, right? I mean, people all over the world are familiar with this old tractor now. Dax Carr asks, are those all the rocks you've gathered up off the farm in the last 3 years? No, these are just what we gathered up this summer. You know, we started with this one right here, the cornerstone. That's the big boulder that we dug off the sand knob back there right after I cleared it. And this other, kind of the first two tiers of my stair step, this stone we took out 2 summers ago. But otherwise, the rest of these perimeter stones, these large ones that make up the outer ring, you know, like this one and this one, they were all gathered up from corners and edges of the field. I'll pop a link up here when I have the Super M out, pulling these things from all points all around, marshaling up to this area. Otherwise, everything else in the middle is everything we picked this summer. Like this big one, yeah, we pulled that one out. All that stuff in the middle that the 20's sitting on, we pulled this one out. We pulled this one out. All this kind of second tier stuff all around here and everything in the middle, that's all that we picked this summer. But you know, it's, to quote Marcus Aurelius, he said, love nothing but that which comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny. For what could more aptly fit your needs? I think it pretty much sums it up. And then, last one, Strike 46 says, at sundown on the equinox, the sun sets above the radiator cap and between the steering levers. Well, I don't know about that, but I can tell you one thing. So if we sight right down the center of the hood line, we are about 295 degrees west-northwest as it sits right now. And if anybody can work the math out that has a more highly functioning brain than me, I would like to know about what day of the year the sun would go down there. Right about this time of year, it's going down over there. Other times of year, it goes down over there. So I gotta believe sometime it's gonna go down there. It'd be neat to find out when that is. Okay, now I think we're finally done. So we're just about out of daylight, so I better stop talking. I just love it up there. I like how that thing looks. So yeah, we kind of got off on a tangent. Again, happens from time to time here on the Squatch 253 channel. Thanks for watching, everybody.